Far off from the mainland, on the island Viksö, ABBA had their summer houses. It was peaceful and quiet, and this is where Björn and Benny wrote the songs for ABBA. With their newly written songs, they went back to town and recorded them in the studio. But where exactly did they go? Let's explore those places and let's see how ABBA spent their time in the studios and how their music came to life. We have to start where we've been before, at Metronome Studio, because this brings us back to the very beginning. ABBA recorded many songs for their first album Ring Ring here, also songs for their third album ABBA, and the entire Waterloo and Arrival albums. On our way to the studio, we can see the surroundings and feel the atmosphere where ABBA was back in the day to arrive at the recording studio. The studio is around this corner and it's number 57. This is where they came and went, and they were actually filmed here for recording sessions, and from all of their songs, it just so happens to have been the session for one of their landmark tracks, Dancing Queen. The footage shows Agneta and Frida recording their vocals for the song. This was the only time that ABBA was filmed during an actual recording session apart from Voyage, and it happened inside this building. The building was actually a cinema in the first place, many decades ago. But the studio goes back a long way. It is one of Stockholm's most historic and important recording facilities, and even long before ABBA, the individual members came and went here for their early solo recordings, namely Agneta Fältskog, Anni-Frid Lyngstad, as well as Björn Ulvaeus with his band The Hootenanny Singers. This is actually where Björn met Michael B. Dretov for the first time, who was sound engineer at Metronome Studio. They worked together, and Dretov later became ABBA's important sound engineer. In the 1960s, virtually every Swedish artist recorded at Metronome Studio, including Charlie Norman, whom we know from his connection with Frida, as well as international artists like Quincy Jones. It was also in this studio where in the 1970s Björn and Benny recorded with Ted Gärdestad, Lena Andersson, and in 1975 Frida recorded her solo album In Some and her backing vocals for Harpo's Movie Star.
Movie star, oh, movie star, oh, oh.
In 1998 there was a 1-hour documentary on Swedish TV with Björn and Per from Roxette about this studio. They walked this way and then went inside the studio. You can still feel their spirits. Today, the studio is retitled as Atlantis Studios. In the last 2 decades, Agneta returned to this place to record her 2 most recent solo albums, My Coloring Book and A. She was even filmed for the music videos for My Coloring Book. Even Benny came back to Metronome, now Atlantis, and reunited with some of ABBA's old studio band to record the soundtrack for Mamma Mia the movie. Björn and Benny came back to this very place for a Q&A documentary, and Benny played a little bit of that song. This building has lots of history and brought us many shining hours of music. But for ABBA, it was also kind of problematic. The facilities and equipment were terrific, but especially because of the studio's popularity, it wasn't easy for them to book the studio for a long period of days. And with their increasing aim to get better and better, they needed time. By 1975, for their third self-titled album ABBA, they really started to take their time in the recording studio. So, ABBA would travel to a suburb in Stockholm and into the basement of a family studio. Let's follow their path and see where our journey leads us next. Here we are in Stocksund, an upper-class suburb in Stockholm. This area here was an important location for Sweden's film industry in the early 20th century, and it was also an important part in ABBA's legacy. In 1974, ABBA recorded the majority of their third self-titled album ABBA at Glenstudios, which opened 2 years earlier. The studio was located in the basement of a private house, and there are some marvelous stories of their time at this special family place. Here we are at the house which used to be Glenstudios. This is where ABBA came and went to record their songs in the mid-70s. I want you to know that this is a private place, so we are not lingering too much here and respect the privacy of the new owners. The house and studio used to belong to Bruno Glenmark and his wife Anne-Louise Hansson. In 1974, Michael Bidretov left Metronome Studios and became sound engineer of Glenstudios for the next 2 years. The advantage for ABBA was that this studio could be booked for longer periods and they would come pretty much as they pleased. The studio in the basement was very small and was described as cramped with space for only 4 to 5 musicians. The studio was also right below the bedrooms. Sometimes ABBA worked late into the nights and the sound was so loud that the kids of the family started to complain. At one point, the house was shaking to the extent that bottles fell from the bathroom cabinet. Despite the small space, Glenstudios was a professional recording studio with good equipment, good sound, and especially Michael Bidretov knew how to make use of it. One day, they discovered the swimming pool in the house, and this big hall was eventually used as an echo chamber to record Janne Schaffer's guitar. Bruno Glenmark's mother-in-law hadn't been warned about this procedure and apparently almost had a heart attack from the explosion of sound. You can hear this on ABBA's So Long, and you can also notice these dazzling sounds on songs like Bang a Boomerang, Hey Hey Helen, and the outtake Ricky Rock'n'Roller. But despite almost having a heart attack from ABBA's explosive sound, Bruno's mother-in-law continued to spoil ABBA with delicious, freshly baked cinnamon rolls filled with butter and sugar. Every day when ABBA came to the studio, the first thing they asked was, "Are there any rolls?" It was somewhat counterproductive for Björn, who wanted to lose weight at that time. To him, the cinnamon rolls were irresistible. Glenstudios and ABBA's time at this place is described as having a homely atmosphere. This is also the place where one of the most curious projects was created at the end of 1975, on which all 4 ABBA members were heavily featured. Michael Bidretov explored the studio after hours and started to work on songs that would become his 1976 album Let's Boogie. The shimmer of ABBA is all over this album and put into a hilarious juxtaposition with Dretov's singing and parodies of different musical genres. Here we are, not far away from the house where Glenstudios used to be. I wanted to bring you here to enjoy the view at the shore and to conclude the story of Glenstudios with some beautiful connections. Bruno Glenmark had a niece and nephew, and those were none other than Karin and Anders Glenmark. In the 1980s, they became part of Björn and Benny's musical Chess, and from then on they formed the Swedish duo Gemini and recorded 2 amazing albums written and produced by Björn and Benny. Anders Glenmark also worked on solo albums from Agneta and Frida, and in 1996 he produced and co-wrote Frida's final album to date. 20 years before, back to 1976, Anders Glenmark recorded the prominent lead guitar for ABBA's Money Money Money. The final ABBA session at Glenstudios was for the basic track of Dancing Queen. This is another turning point in their ambition to perfect their recordings. They continued to work on this song for several weeks. Remember, the vocals for Dancing Queen were eventually recorded and filmed back at Metronome Studios. ABBA's 4th album, Arrival, became one of their most successful studio albums and brought them back to Metronome Studios. But already in 1974, around their time at Glenstudios, Björn, Benny and Michael Bidretov had early fantasies about building their own recording studio. That would still take a few more years until this landmark history would happen. In December 1977, ABBA released their 5th album, ABBA the Album. It was yet another artistic progression for ABBA in the songwriting, meaningful lyrics and beautiful words, in their vocal arrangements and overall soundscape.
Their latest album is The Album.
Here we are at Marcus Music Studio. This is where the majority of ABBA's 5th album was recorded. Markus' music studio was fairly large with superb acoustics and impressive equipment. The Harrison mixing desk was state-of-the-art, and the same model would later be part of ABBA's own Polar Music Studio. Today it is called Soundtrade Studios. The connection to ABBA is very intriguing. The studio was opened in 1974 by Markus Österdahl, one of Sweden's top arrangers. In 1963, Markus and his band, the Telstars, toured Sweden together with the Beatles. Most intriguingly, he also crossed paths with the future members of ABBA. The Telstars became the house band for the Swedish show Drop-In, and on that occasion he witnessed Benny's television debut with the Hepstars in 1965. Markus was unimpressed and called them uneducated musicians who just made a lot of noise. He would go on to create arrangements for Agneta's Swedish solo songs, for Frida's debut single and other Frida songs produced by Benny, and eventually even for Benny's band, the Hepstars. So in 1977 they all came together again when ABBA was using his recording studio for ABBA the album. But once again, ABBA had problems with just not getting enough studio time. So towards the end of sessions for ABBA the album, they moved to a small town on the west coast of Sweden and spent 1 week at Bohus studio. This studio was inconspicuously located in the middle of nowhere in an industrial area inside a 2-story brick building. But it was one of Sweden's most modern and meticulously constructed recording studios. It offered ABBA a place to actually live for the week, and even more so, peace and quiet. In one of the few TV reports of ABBA in 1977, Björn and Benny are visited in this studio and play back a preview of their next single, an early mix of The Name of the Game. Initially, ABBA's presence in town went unnoticed, but soon a crowd of 40 children was waiting outside every day to get their autographs after school. The owners of the studio were also impressed with ABBA's humble behavior. The studio had an employed maid for bedrooms, dishes and cooking, and yet one day Frida was caught in the kitchen drying the dishes. "Frida, you don't have to do that, but I feel like doing it." The week at Bohus studio was mostly used for overdubs and mixing. Agneta was heavily pregnant and remained home in Stockholm. By that time, ABBA's fantasy of their very own state-of-the-art recording studio was starting to take shape, and their dream came true in 1978 with their Polar Music Studio. Here it is, ABBA's very own Polar Music Studios. Well, at least that's where it once was. The building is still there, but the studio was closed in 2004, and today there is a gym. But look at this, from here you have a most beautiful view. These facilities also used to be a cinema, and there was also a swimming pool inside. But then the studio opened in 1978. The first ABBA song recorded here was Summer Night City. Then they would record the next 3 studio albums at Polar. They would also film interviews here and record 2 of their music videos, Gimme Gimme Gimme, A Man After Midnight, and the Spanish version of I Have a Dream, Estoy Soñando. In the 80s we also got to see more from inside the studio and the recording sessions of Björn and Benny's musical Chess, as well as Frida's solo album Something's Going On, and Agneta's first 2 English language solo albums, which were all recorded here. There were also many famous international artists here at Polar Studios, from Led Zeppelin and Genesis to Celine Dion, Alice Cooper, the Rolling Stones and many others. And in 1996, Frida returned to Polar Studios for her most recent solo album, and one of the last albums recorded here was the second album for Benny Andersson's orchestra. Okay, so this gym is really strange. I just sneaked through the window and saw some very odd scenes. Look at that. What's going on there? So these studios really are the equivalent to the Beatles' Abbey Road studios. So it's even a bigger shame that today it no longer exists. But we can still go there and remember the outside facade. That's what we usually associate anyway when we think of Polar Music Studios, when the fans were waiting outside back in the day just to get a glimpse of ABBA when they arrived in the morning and came out in the evening. Were you one of those fans? Let me know in the comments below. I want to go to town, to the old town, to Gamla Stan. But let's sit here for a moment to relax and to enjoy that view. This is one of my favorite places, and you might recognize it too. This is Stockholm's town hall, the Stadshuset. Now concentrate on that building. If you concentrate long enough, you might see them. Yes, here they are again, ABBA from 1975, with the town hall in the background. They were promoting jeans and shirts for the Spanish brand Louis. The Stadshuset has many more ABBA-related connections, and one of them goes way back to 1955, when Benny, at 8 years old, played the accordion inside that building for an event. He always stayed true to that instrument. And here is where it all began for him. It was his first ever appearance on stage in that hall over there. And in 1977, ABBA were back on this shore to shoot the photograph for the inner sleeve of ABBA the album. So what is so special about this place? Well, this is the shore of the Evert Taube terrace. He is one of Sweden's most respected musicians and composers. Björn recorded many songs from Evert Taube with his band the Hootenanny Singers, even dedicating entire albums to him. In 1971, Evert Taube wrote the musical soundtrack for the film The Apple War, and one of the songs was called Änglamark. It became the anthem of the Swedish environmental movement in the 70s. I'm mentioning this because 2 decades later, this was one of the songs that Frida recorded for her environmental project. So there are quite a few ABBA connections to Evert Taube. A few years ago, Björn and Benny were 2 of the founders for the Taube World Foundation in memory of Evert Taube. Benny said that whenever he's stuck while composing music, he listens to Evert Taube, and that Benny discovered his music when he was 8 years old. So maybe it was one of his songs from Evert Taube, which Benny played on that accordion in the town hall. As I said, this is one of my favorite places here, just for the atmosphere alone. And here's one of my favorite photographs that I took one summer's day. You can see the sunset over the Stadshuset. Now let's hear what Björn has to say about this place, and maybe he will lead us to our next destination for today.
What you see right over there, this is the town hall where all the politicians gather and talk for days and days. And over there you see the old town, where actually Benny and Frida have a flat.
So what are we waiting for? Let's go to Stockholm's old town. This is Gamla Stan. Narrow alleyways will lead our way. This was filmed for Agneta's TV special, and she was seeking shelter in this alleyway. That's how it looks today. I can still see those children running by. This is the corner where Agneta went in, like that. And that's the spot where she stood. And before we go to the apartment where Benny and Frida used to live, I want to show you 2 spots where ABBA were. This is the Järntorget, where they were photographed in 1975. It's quite a nice place. And someone else seems to be keeping guard of this important fountain and ABBA location. Again, a final turnaround shot, so we have an idea of the surroundings. And here we are at Stortorget, the central place in the heart of Gamla Stan. ABBA were standing here in 1977 to the right side next to this fountain. Notice the two buildings in the background to the right, because it was exactly here when 10 years later Agneta was bicycling across this place for the music video of her song I Wasn't the One Who Said Goodbye. But that's where it all happened. And notice that gentleman in the background being witness to this ABBA photo session in the middle of Gamla Stan. We also have a photo of Benny and Frida, I think signing something, so who knows, maybe he asked them nicely. Now let's stay with Benny and Frida and visit their old apartment here in Gamla Stan. Oh look, Agneta's bicycle. Here we are, folks. This is the house in which Benny and Frida lived in the mid-70s. They were living in the two upper floors and had to climb 99 steps of a winding staircase to get there. Over the years, we got some photographs of inside the house and apartment, and in 1976, a film crew gathered here in this very apartment to shoot scenes for 5 TV commercials with ABBA to promote electronic products from National, now known as Panasonic. These commercials were done so they could cover the costs for their upcoming tour through Europe and Australia. We talked about that recently on our little documentary about that tour. So it all happened here in this apartment of Benny and Frida. What an efficient way of filmmaking.
There is so much more to National, so much more than just the many, many things we make.
It's all long gone, but somehow it is still here. Let's go over there. Here we will find the garden of these houses. It was here where they took breaks from shooting the commercials. Agneta and Frida sat on a bench, and today you will find a different bench here, which has slightly moved, but it was in this garden where they were. So that's Gamla Stan, where they took photographs, filmed their videos, lived their private lives. This is it, ABBA's Polar office, their headquarters. Here they were, on the first floor and downstairs, where Björn and Benny had their office. Right next to it, Agneta and Frida had their room, where they studied their dance routines with Graham Tate. You can recognize the shape of the window to the left. They gave interviews here, did all the organization, had meetings with their management, and tried to call people.
We're sorry, the number you have reached is not in service.
This is where they played music. And where they were looking at posters of themselves. The address is Baldersgatan 1. Their manager, Stig Andersson, was standing next to this gate where we go in now. Well, at least into the courtyard, to be a little closer. Today, this is the house for the Swedish Healthcare Association. Here we are, in Lidingö. This is the island where ABBA used to live from the mid-70s until the 80s. Let's take a walk and stroll past their old houses.
In these old familiar rooms, children would play.
So Agneta and Björn moved quite a lot. They had no less than 3 houses together here in Lidingö. And here's a picture of Agneta and Björn's first house in Lidingö, which is a little harder to get to. This is the second house they were living in. Quite close to their second house is this meadow. In 1977, ABBA filmed some scenes for their music video Knowing Me Know You in the snowy landscape of Lidingö. I'm not sure about the exact spot, but it was filmed somewhere in this area. The third and last house in which they lived together in Lidingö is also a bit far off, and as far as I know, we never got any photographs from outside. But they filmed scenes inside that house as part of another music video, The Name of the Game. As always, filmmaking at its most efficient and economic. You can recognize that big window on the corner. This is the front window and this is the side part. Now, last time we visited Benny and Frida in Stockholm's Old Town. In 1977 they also moved to Lidingö. Let's visit their old house here. It is a big mansion, also known as the Pink Villa. Here it is, the mansion in which Frida and Benny live together, beautifully embedded into Lidingö's nature. As you can see, the mansion is actually not pink, so I'm not quite sure where that name came from. This is the entrance area. Right now the building seems to be empty and under constructions. Over the years we've had quite a few photographs that were taken here. Some of the most famous ones are from the time when Frida and Benny got married. You can recognize the windows and railing leading to the door. Also in 1978 we've got some pictures in front of the mansion with all 4 of them together with a very lucky fan. In 1979, photos for the inner sleeve of ABBA's Greatest Hits Volume 2 were all taken in Lidingö, and Frida was shown in front of the Pink Villa reading a book. In the basement of the mansion, Benny had a small studio, which was one of the places where they wrote and recorded demos for their songs. And we actually have a little more footage from the Pink Villa. In 1969, the Swedish film Miss and Mrs. Sweden was filmed at this mansion. You can see some quick scenes in the trailer for the film and clearly recognize the facade. This is the view in front of the house. Let's go down to the harbor to enjoy some more of Lidingö's nature. So this is where Benny was pictured with his boat for the inner sleeve of Greatest Hits Volume 2. The boat is called Andante. We've also seen it in many other photos over the years, as well as in the music video for Summer Night City. One day, we will be looking for the exact trees and bushes that we see behind Agneta and Björn. Just kidding. Now there is one more building to visit in Lidingö, and it's the house in which Agneta moved in 1979 after the separation from Björn. Let's go there. And that's the house. As always, there's not much to see, and we're not going any closer. Don't forget that all of this was decades ago. New owners live in these houses now, and today it has nothing to do with ABBA at all, apart from our memories. But we do have some wonderful film footage from 1980, when a young fan met Agneta and Linda at her house. You can watch the entire film here on YouTube, and there are also some short glimpses of Benny's and Frida's mansion. So here we are, back in central Stockholm. We are going back to the 60s. This is the apartment complex where a young Benny Andersson from the famous Swedish group the Hepstars used to live in. The address says number 4V, so he was probably living on floor 5, which is one of the 2 upper floors. Here is a glimpse into the entrance area. This is where he came and went. In his street not too far away from here, Benny shot one of his more popular photographs in 1966. And this is the backside of the building. From here, you can actually see Stockholm's town hall in the distance. So, these are some of the old places where ABBA used to live, in and around Stockholm. Maybe some of you actually met them at any of these houses. This is your chance to share your memories and stories.
Gode Gud, vad är klockan? Över 2. Jag har somnat lite. Den katten den var glad. Tack ska du ha.
This is one of my favorite places here. If you are in Stockholm, you really have to take this walk. In the center you see the town hall again, which is where you might remember a very young Benny Andersson played on stage for the very first time. I'm sure many of you know it, but some of you might go, this balcony, where have I seen this balcony? Well, in 2008, for the very first time in 22 years, all 4 members of ABBA were seen together in public for the Swedish premiere of Mamma Mia the movie. Agneta and Frida were together in the center, but Björn and Benny were to the far left and right respectively. So it would take almost another decade until all 4 members were actually photographed together, side by side, again for a Mamma Mia project, The Party. And that's when Voyage was waiting around the corner. But Mamma Mia the movie brought them together for the very first time. ABBA's reunion for Voyage. We trace back when it happened. We try to understand how it happened. But today we are going to explore that magical place where it all happened. This is the place. This is Benny's Mono Music headquarters. His office, his recording studio, Benny's daily worksite. It's an old warehouse which is more than 150 years old and which used to belong to the Swedish Marine. Benny founded his Mono Music label in 1987 and moved into this area in 1992. The facilities belong to Benny and his son Ludwig. They see each other every day and work together. But this building is also where ABBA left in 2019 to shoot that now iconic reunion photo in the snow. They left the building and walked to the left onto this meadow which was covered in snow. They were standing somewhere here in the middle of this place, and you can recognize this building in the background. You see the hotel to the right side of the frame. You can also see this building to the left, which we see here and which houses a research facility. This was in 2019. Now, the fact is, the ABBA members had meetings here before, several times in the past, to have discussions and to talk about this and that. In 2013, around the time when ABBA the Museum opened, Benny, Frida and Björn were together. Agneta was in London to promote her album A, but she did in fact meet with Benny at his office to play her album to him. At the end of that year, Björn confirmed that all 4 members of ABBA were together in November or December to discuss if they should do something for their upcoming 40th anniversary. They decided not to reunite. But they did give us a live album in 2014 from one of their Wembley concerts. The press conference was held at Mono Music and Benny played Intermezzo No. 1 on his piano for the reporters. Of course, the other members were not there, but Ludwig said that they all listened to the album and enjoyed it. Well, it would only take a few more years until they were back where we are now, but this time they finally took that important way and went into the recording studio again to record new music together. Let's go there. This is an impossible name even for Swedes, as Ludwig said. The studio is called Riksmixningsverket and it means National Institutional Department of Mixing. In fact, that funny name was invented by ABBA's sound engineer Michael Bitretto, and it was actually intended to be the name for ABBA's original, very own studio back in the day, which was then simply given the iconic name Polar Music Studio. That studio closed down in 2004. Many remember that name from Tretto and used it for this new studio, which was built in 2011 into this second warehouse next to his office. 2 key persons at Benny's studio are Lynn Fiat, house engineer and studio manager, as well as engineer Bernard Löhr. Benny recorded some of his solo work and music with his orchestra here. This is also where his choir album from 2015 was recorded and Benny's piano album 2 years later. He's also producing music for other artists, for example for the Swedish folk music Female Group and for his very own movie soundtracks, the fantasy films Circle and Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. And this is also where the Voyage band had their rehearsals in early 2022, witnessing the beauty and magic of these surroundings and delivering us content.
Content!
Content! Bit of content.
Here's some bloody
You don't see any content?
Content.
Any content?
Where's the content? Where's the content? Where's the content? Where's the content? Where's the content?
The studio is generally convenient for many string sections, for film soundtracks as we have seen, but also for pop songs. The strings for Sweden's winning song at the Eurovision Song Contest in 2012, Euphoria by Loreen, were recorded here. One of the most recent projects happens to be string-oriented too, the symphonic touch of Benny Andersson by Swedish violinist Christian Svarva with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Of course, many other Swedish artists are recording and mixing at RMV too, as well as international musicians, for example Coldplay and Cat Stevens. And now another local act, and world stars all the same, got together to record at Benny's studio. But how must it have been for ABBA to say goodbye in 1982 at Polar and to come back 35 years later at this completely new environment? Well, this studio, in many ways, seems to be the most logical and natural follow-up to ABBA's Polar music studio. Besides that curious name originally intended for Polar, RMV does have many more survivals from there. Inside the studio you will find Benny's unique Yamaha GX1 synthesizer. The heart and soul of RMV is this mixing desk, a vintage, fully restored Neve console. This one is described as the most sought after Neve console. Neve consoles are considered to be one of the world's most outstanding products. ABBA's very own mixing desk at Polar Music Studio, a Harrison mixing console, was state-of-the-art, but it was modified to resemble a Neve desk. They did work with a Neve before at Metronome Studios. Now, at Benny's studio, an original Neve is used again. It actually belonged to Swedish producer and songwriter Max Martin, famous for his work with Britney Spears, Celine Dion, Taylor Swift, Coldplay, and many others. Benny's studio also has these very special microphones which were used for the Voyage album with a steampunk design and an impressive size, capturing those voices with a full and warm sound. The technique in Benny's studio is also found in many high-class recording studios around the world, for example London's Abbey Road. However, RMV Studio has many more features that make it one of the most unique recording studios. First of all, unlike many other studios, it is not down a basement with no light. According to Benny, that's how it usually is, and it's mainly to have a good, isolated sound. In the case of RMV, it is believed that these warehouses have been used as an ammunition dump for the naval base. That brick architecture is solid enough to make it perfect for acoustics. On top of that, the many doors and windows on ground level make RMV one of the brightest and friendliest recording venues in the world, with a light and open atmosphere. Agneta herself commented how great her experience was. When we got back together in the studio, I had no idea what to expect. But Benny's recording studio is such a friendly and safe environment, and before I knew it, I was really enjoying myself. I can hardly believe that finally the moment has come to share this with the world. In a Billboard article from October 2022, Ludwig confirmed that ABBA was there for a month. What was fascinating when ABBA reunited was that they walked through the door, and from an outsider's perspective, it was as if it was yesterday. There was no, oh wow, how cool is it that we are back together. It was just like, okay, hello, let's have a coffee and do our tests, and then get to work, which was really lovely to see. They were there for a month and had quite reasonable working hours for 75-year-olds. So they finished that remaining half of their new album Voyage in early 2021 over a period of 1 month, which must have been a most creative, productive and prolific time. And this is where it all happened. This is where ABBA came and went to record Voyage. We now know that they recorded sporadically between 2017 and 2019, and then again in early 2021. Over the course of 4 years, they did rehearsals, recordings and mixing sessions in complete secrecy. Who knows if and when they will return, but they did return after 40 years to leave some more magic in music here at this wonderful place.